coming into this show, I was really nervous because the last time I had a chat with a first aider, it was when I was doing my training, and I can distinctly remember sweaty palms.
Oh, yeah.
And feeling lightheaded and needing to go outside. So I'm hoping that today's conversation will not put me into this state.
No. I promise not to do that.
Okay, good. Just giving you a forewarning. If I do look a little bit faint, we can
You're
pause.
in safe hands.
I'm in safe hands. Fantastic. That's right. So thank you so much for coming down and agreeing to kind of do this show. I really am looking forward to talking to you. I've heard you speak a couple of times about mental health first aid. And I found it really enlightening, and I can't wait to kind of pick your brain and just kind of learn more about what's going on in this space.
Oh, thank you.
So I may start with what I find really interesting, which is over COVID, it looks like you made a transition from the best job in the world to becoming a mental health first aid trainer and starting your own business, really, right? So why did you leave being a school nurse?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Yes, well, I actually started my business earlier in 2018, so pre-COVID, but it was very much a side gig. It was something I did as well as being a nurse because I really loved the education. I loved teaching people and I felt like I could do it better. So that's how Remedy First Aid Training came about. During the pandemic, I was still working at the school and of course we were off-site for most of the year. No one was, very few students and staff were on site. So it was tough. It was a tough time. Actually, I was very much gearing up to becoming full-time in my business. So the decision was actually made for me in many ways. The organisation I was working for did a bit of a restructure and things just ended up that, suddenly I was full-time with Remedy First Aid. So I'd actually already signed myself up to become a mental health first aid instructor. It had always been something I was very passionate about doing and the timing just felt right. It just... I think through the pandemic, with so many people being impacted or the mental health being impacted, I just knew that was the right time to really be able to help people and give people skills to support each other.
So for how long was this intention of being a mental health first aider and starting your business kind of bubbling away? When did it really kind of happen for you?
I think it happened over a number of months where I became very interested in exploring it more. I took the mental health first aid course as a learner when I worked for Barwon Health many years ago. It was 2006. I recently found my certificate. So it's a long time ago. But I remember at the time how powerful the course was and remember thinking, wow, that's really like nothing I've ever done before. So even during my nursing training, during my professional experience, nothing actually equips you to be a first aider for mental health.
Which is bizarre, don't you think? I mean,
yes.
I guess like one thing I was wondering about coming into this discussion was, how much of kind of physical well-being is kind of rooted in something mental?
Yes. Well, there's the mind-body connection is huge, isn't it? It's often the physical signs there's so many physical signs with mental illness or mental health problems. People often think about, they don't put it together. They don't connect the two. The weight loss or the tiredness or I'm not sleeping properly or can't concentrate or physical things, but they're actually linked to mental health problem.
I want to ask you about what mental health first aid really is.
Yeah. Good question. If you think about it in the physical first aid sense, you learn the skills you learn the signs to be able to recognise when there's a problem and then how to assist appropriately until the ambulance comes or another medical professional comes and takes over. It's the same with your mental health first aid. It's an awareness course where you learn the signs to look out for that indicate there's a problem.
Mental health first aid is not really about kind of helping yourself. I mean, it's just like first aid, right? I mean, when you say it, it becomes obvious, right?
Yes.
I mean, when you do a first aid course, it's never about giving yourself CPR. It's about, the other person and kind of taking care of your community.
It definitely is. But I often find people in the course, they actually kind of relate to things or they can actually go, oh, okay, so that's actually maybe what's going on. They have a better understanding perhaps of their own selves through learning about the common mental health problems.
Yeah, I remember having that that moment when I was listening to you speak,
did you?
actually, because you were talking about how panic attacks
Yes.
or anxiety attacks are a sign of, that you maybe need a bit of mental health help.
Yes.
Right. And I was like, oh man, there have been periods in my life where I've had this, and
They're very common.
and I never recognized it at that point as, oh, I need mental health help. But yeah.
But not everybody does. Someone can have a single episode of a panic attack, which is frightening. It's distressing. It's not life-threatening. And the person may not need to get professional help. But certainly if it's impacting and it's having a impact over time and they're recurring, then they absolutely should get some help because there is effective help available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first skill that you teach is recognizing.
Yeah.
Hey, can you share a bit more about, what is this kind of, what are we looking
Sure.
out for?
Yeah. So it's all about learning about the common mental health problems. So the most common ones in Australia are being anxiety, depression, or major depressive disorders, as well as substance use disorders. So we do focus on what are the signs that someone is experiencing one of these problems. And then what it does is it gives you a structure or a framework, an action plan that you can apply to all mental health situations.
And are the signs that we're looking out for same across these three different disorders? You mentioned anxiety, depressive disorders, and substance abuse.
Yeah. Look, they're different. They're different signs, and it depends really what every individual will present slightly different. Someone won't have all the signs and symptoms, but they're often the physical, and particularly when we talk about anxiety, it affects all body systems. So the physical symptoms, are enormous. We do a little activity in the class actually, and we get people to go through the alphabet and pick out words associated with anxiety. And you'd never think that there'd be a whole alphabet worth. Well, there's more than that. A couple for each letter.
Yeah.
We think about the racing thoughts, with sweaty palms, like the chest pain. Like there's so many that can be associated with anxiety, fast breathing, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way. That we've got a whole kind of a set of words across each letter of the alphabet dedicated to describing our mental conditions.
But it's the physiological symptoms that are so intense that really people often don't put them together.
Okay, cool. And of these three different kind of disorders, where do you think the kind of need is? When you run these workshops, right? Which disorder in particular are people kind of attracted to because it's very common and because it is kind of unspoken? I don't know, but which is the kind of the hot one?
It's really interesting. I think anxiety is often a big one that people perhaps it isn't just spoken about. Depression, I think we've got a better awareness of, a better understanding of. If you think about, there's lots of campaigns and lots of organisations, Beyond Blue and Lifeline that have been around for some time and do great, fabulous work. But there's much greater awareness, I think, of depression, and people are more likely to kind of relate or understand that. Whereas the anxiety, I think, is a big one that people are like, oh, okay, I hadn't really thought that was what was going on yet. It's incredibly common.
Is it because depressive disorders, when they get extreme, the consequences are, self-harm or suicide? Is it because the kind of, down the line, the effects of it are more dramatic? Is that why we're more aware of it? Or?
Well, self-harm can be associated with anxiety as well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And actually they're all often interlinked because even the substance use, like high levels of anxiety for a long time often leads to substance use as a coping strategy. Then using that can obviously depression, and it's almost this cycle. And what comes first, it's hard to say, but they often go together, anxiety and depression.
I see. So you're finding that in these workshops, you're finding that participants are quite well aware of depressive disorders.
Yeah, they seem to
with
be.
Regards to anxiety, there's it's almost like like a surprise that this is part of the course.
I think people can relate to it. People can relate to it. I mean, we all experience anxiety to various levels, yeah? That's quite normal in our functional every day. We have to have a little bit of anxiety because it's what keeps us safe in situations and, helps us make decisions, etc.
Yeah, which is why I'm wondering whether it's a surprise to people because are we kind of labeling it a disorder or because it's so it's so prevalent. Like
Yes.
in your day, you feel anxious at some point or another about something. Is it really a disorder? And so I guess like I'm
When does it
wondering whether,
become?
when does it
Yeah.
become?
Yeah, and that's a really great point because you're right. There is anxiety every day. We've got to have a little bit of anxiety, and that's very normal, that those fluctuations. But something becomes a problem when it's longer lasting and when it's having an impact on the person's life. That might be in their working life, in their jobs, within their relationships, their everyday functioning. So that's when it actually becomes a disorder.
So I want to ask you about substance abuse, right? I have heard people kind of just laugh about substance abuse as a coping mechanism, and I'm just wondering, how people react to this being on this hit list of disorders,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good question. And look, we mostly focus on alcohol use because it's the most widely used substance in Australia. There was a study that was done and they surveyed Australians between the ages of 16 and 85 and how many people had used the substance, not necessarily to excess, but how many people had used that substance in the previous 12 months. Now, this was pre-COVID. So the results could be, a little different. But 76% of Australians have used alcohol in the previous 12 months.
Right,
So
okay.
there's a lot of people drinking alcohol. But it's part of our culture too, isn't it?
Yes.
We celebrate, we have a drink, there's so many, special
correct.
occasions.
Drinking is so much part of Australian culture,
Yes.
right? So where do people kind of, how does your course, I'm really curious about how your course draws that line and helps people recognize when it crosses over into,
Well, really, it's about, again, when it's impacting on the person's life. And it doesn't have to be impacting all areas of life. We talk about 4 L's as a way of recognizing. So the L's being liver is the person's physical health being impacted by their substance use.
Yep.
So are they losing weight? Are they not sleeping? Are they, not eating properly because of the substance that they're using?
Okay.
Second one being love. And are there relationships? And that could be your personal, intimate relationships, your working relationships. Are they being impacted because of the person's substance use? Livelihood. So that's work or school. Is the person not going to work or not turning up at school because of the substance that they're using? And then the 4th L being law. Are they coming into trouble with the law?
Right, okay.
Because of their substance use? And again, that's just a really simple way of gauging. Is this substance having an impact on the person's life? And it doesn't have to be in all areas. It could just be 1 or 2 to be having a significant impact.
That's a pretty high threshold, though. I mean, all of these things are a pretty high threshold. It feels like maybe substance abuse is not as, prevalent a disorder, in society as
but
much
it's
as some of the
often
others.
linked with mental health problems. So that is really why we cover it in a mental health first aid course, because of the links to anxiety, to depression, to even psychotic illnesses. There is that high link. And many mental health experts will actually say that addiction, it is a mental illness. So that's why it's kind of classed under,
I see.
in the mental health first aid.
So can you tell me a little bit about your course and the structure of the course? Are there different forms of the course, or is it pretty straightforward and standard for across all?
I teach the standard mental health first aid, which is designed for the community, really. It's your standard course. It's appropriate for anyone that wants to assist another adult to support them. There is also a youth course. And look, they're very similar in terms of what they cover, the structure that's provided and the mental health conditions, but it's more tailored towards the individual, the group. So with your youth mental health first aid, it covers more eating disorders. It covers non-suicidal self-injury and other conditions that are applicable to, or more applicable to, the younger, and obviously the statistics for younger people. So it's different in that way. There's also an older person's mental health first aid course.
Oh, what's it called?
It is called that. Older persons,
okay.
which I don't have that one, but the workplace mental health first aid as well. And that's, again, it's all really similar format, but it's tailored
for that context.
The context, exactly. So it's contextual to the workplace.
Who are the people that kind of reach out and ask and look out for this standard course for their communities? Like, are you finding that it's a particular type of kind of personality, or is it a particular type of is it a demographic? Who's asking for this
Sure.
course? Because I'm sure it's in high demand.
Definitely. And I work with a lot of workplaces, a lot of organisations. So they are actually wanting to, much like they have physical first aid, which is mandatory, having physical first aiders. It's not mandatory for a mental health first aider.
It should, the way.
Oh,
It feels like-
absolutely. And that's our wish in the future, is that that will be the case. But it's great to know that organisations are actually going, hey, we care about our people, and we understand that mental health problems are common. People are not robots, and people don't just park everything at the door on the way in the morning.
Yeah.
Everything comes with them, and that does have an impact. So we want to have people within the organisation who can support.
So organizations are asking for this primarily.
Well, I do a lot of work with organisations. Most of the work that I do is with organisations, and that's really varied in terms of who. I work with schools. I've worked with...
So when you say schools, you mean the teachers as well?
Yeah. So it's usually the teaching staff.
Yep.
Something I'm very keen to do in the future is actually is to work with the teens and actually give them the skills to support each other. So that's all in the future. But yeah, teaching staff to be able to support the young people.
Yeah, it feels like you haven't left schools, eh?
I know.
Physically you've left them, but really it feels like your heart is with these kids.
Oh, it's so funny, Manesh. Even on when I worked in the school, when the bell would ring and it was the end of term,
you'd feel sad.
That feeling? I'm not sad.
No,
the excitement. It's holidays,
okay. Okay. So it makes you feel young again working at school. Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a lovely environment. Yeah.
So being so passionate about mental health, the best nurses in my experience are those who are talking to you as they are kind of treating you. And it's almost as if the talking and the conversation is far more important and far more powerful for the person receiving help.
Yes.
Could you share your thoughts?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think it's so important that we don't lose that human element, isn't it? That we're doing a task or we're assisting someone, whether it's physical first aid or we're changing a wound dressing or whatever we might be doing, giving some medication or educating someone. But remember that they're a person with feelings, and it's so important that we do keep that manner.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
With that compassion, yeah.
Do you have any stories from the trenches?
What do you ask?
Standout moments, as a school nurse?
Yeah. Look, there's been a few funny situations. Maybe I'll share them first.
Please.
A student was swimming in the pool,
right,
and the lane rope, and got his finger stuck in the lane rope. I know it sounds terrible, but you can imagine when they ring me and say, he's in the pool, I'm thinking, I'm going to have to get in the pool.
Right, okay.
And help him. I didn't have to.
Yeah, okay.
But by the time I get over there, the maintenance team are there. They've got the kid out of the water. They're dragging the whole lane rope into the first aid room, and because they didn't want to cut it.
Yeah.
That was the poor thing, and we freed his finger, and he was okay. But it was one of those with the loops in it. I don't think they use them anymore.
Oh, I see.
I don't know. Well, I don't know.
Yep.
The risk and compliance person got involved after that. And
okay.
I'm not sure what happened. But that was an interesting one. We've had a couple of funny injuries of just pens, kids playing with pens and bits flicking out and embedding into fingers and things like that. Lots of finger dislocations from ball injuries.
Do they? Has anyone fainted on you in schools, because of their inability to, be around blood? Or
no, that hasn't happened.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I've seen some.
Our kids are resilient.
Very pale.
Yeah. Okay.
Think, hang on, sit down.
Yeah. How about the teachers? Do the teachers?
Some of the teachers don't cope very well. Some of the teachers don't. You go straight to the nurse.
I see.
They are first aid trained, most of them.
Yep.
And they do have a
but
basic.
They're a lot like me, I imagine. Get weak in the knees. And did you ever find young people just needing to talk, or teachers just needing to talk, and that's why they were sent to the nurse?
Yeah. Look,
often,
often we would, and I think that's that's the mental health side of things a lot of the time. The school I was working in had a counselling team. So that was great to have that support as well. But I often found, it would be often that the students were coming in to see the nurses, and usually because we were available. We might be busy doing things. Sometimes we had a whole room and it wasn't particularly private. That's the other thing. So it wasn't always a great opportunity to have a chat. But we had some great sometimes opportunities to sit down and have a cup of tea. make the kids a cup of tea and have a chat about things.
How nice.
Yeah. Because they needed it, you know.
Yeah.
And often it was anxiety or panic attacks that brought them in, and that really heightened state of panic. And you're thinking, my goodness, let's just sit down. But their ability to work through that and take themselves back to class would never cease to amaze me.
Yeah, but it's the capacity of the mental health first aider, right? Who's kind of coaching them or kind of nurturing them back into that state.
Definitely. Yeah.
Do the participants of your courses go on to share stories of how they have applied their skills?
Yeah, I often get emails from people, which is really nice. Just to hear that they say, oh, look, I actually, I gave my friend a call after the course. I've been worried about this person. I gave them a ring to see how they're going. Or I actually applied mental health first aid with a colleague at work. And how great that they feel they're empowered to be able to support someone around them. Well, to know that to recognise it's a problem for one, but then feel confident to reach out and help them.
I'd love to know more about your workplace course and and how that looks and how's that's different.
The workplace course uses some more contextualised scenarios.
Okay.
Talks more about reasonable adjustment in situations, which is more workplace specific. So look, I still find a lot of organisations are very happy with the standard course, and it's still during the course there's an opportunity to, for discussion, and they might want to discuss specific, workplace individual things, which we can do, but the skills apply really for all areas.
Would they have invited you to run the course because an event or a cultural element is kind of triggering this? And if so, like, what are some of the common, triggers for a company to actually want to reach out and get a...
Yeah, that's a good, because most big organisations have an employee assistance program, so they do have supports, in place. But it's often that people either aren't reaching out to that, or they want to have something else in addition to that, because having mental health first aiders it complements those existing services.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And often it's that person, and it might be different people across the organisation that they choose to train or put through this training, because...
so it's not across the board. Not everybody does it sometimes.
No, well, it depends on the organisation, because if you think about the structure of the organisation, putting managers through their training is amazing. But not everybody's comfortable talking to their manager about their mental health as they are as talking about a sprained ankle or a, gastro bug or something. It's quite different, isn't it? So
of course,
having people at different levels is really important, because people have different relationships within the workplace. We just, as humans, we connect better with certain people.
Yeah, of course.
So
it's just realizing the dynamics of that particular organization and being able to kind of tailor the course or tailor the delivery of that course based on whatever their needs really are.
We can certainly contextualize some scenarios and examples. That really helps.
What are some of the kind of common ones, and what are some of the more interesting ones, I guess, like these scenarios?
They can't concentrate at work.
Okay.
They're getting very anxious. Well, they're getting very upset about things, flustered on things. You approach them over lunch one day, and what do you do? Or how do you turn this into a mental health first aid conversation? And it brings up lots of things to discuss. So we work in smaller groups and get people applying the action plan, applying the steps to this particular scenario.
It's more about just being aware of your community and seeing how, and rather than looking at a work problem as a work problem, but start to recognize that, hey, actually a work problem could be a mental health problem, and maybe that's what they need.
Yeah. Well, it could be either they've got a mental health problem that's impacting on their work, or their work is impacting on their mental health. Like both can happen, can't they?
Yeah. So some of these, I see. Right. And so then it's for the managers to learn how to recognize these signs and maybe recognize that perhaps they are a catalyst somehow in creating this mental health problem.
Possibly.
Maybe they're putting too much stress on their employees, and learning how to kind of recognize that before it gets out of hand.
Yeah. And how can we support? That's really how can we support the person, not jump to conclusions, because it's easy to do that in thinking they're just being lazy. They're not pulling their weight. They're not submitting things on time. They're not meeting their deadlines. But actually be curious. Is there more going on? And ask the right questions.
Is it culturally appropriate to be curious? I find that when you ask someone how they are, are you okay? Or how are you? You often get a polite answer. It feels like a culturally polite question to ask. And I must give you a polite kind of answer, right? And people are very private about people are, I don't know, is it an issue that people, don't know how to be vulnerable or but I feel people don't want to go deeper. And so I'm just wondering about.
Easily dismissed, isn't it? That question too. How are you? Oh yeah, I'm good. So not everyone is prepared to talk about how they're actually feeling, and perhaps not in the workplace too. But there's a whole range of reasons why that is, because they're scared. There's fear.
So does your course, I guess, teach people the skills to be able to kind of ask that question or know when to ask that question, when not to ask that question, and how to ask it multiple times so you don't get that dismissive, I'm good, yeah, I'm great.
We do focus a lot on communication and asking open-ended questions so you don't get that yes, no, kind of, you actually get a bit more, and then following up with questions. So we do focus a lot on that. If you see signs or you're concerned about someone, the very best thing you could do is ask them, are they okay? Or ask them, you'll word it however you want to word it, but check in with them, see how they're going. And you might preface it with something like, gee, this is a hard question for me to ask, but I've just noticed you're turning up a bit late for work. You've seemed a bit flustered lately. I care about you. Is everything okay? You could really sort of lead into it that way.
Yeah, so you give context to your question so that it's clear about your intention behind the question and that it's coming from a place of, that you've observed, and it's coming from a place of, love and care and it becomes a safer question.
Yeah, not everyone will want to talk.
Yeah,
because some people are very private people. And you still might have some concerns about them, but we have to respect that they don't want to talk, or they don't, but we could just let them know, hey, I'm here. If you change your mind and you do want to talk in the future, I'd love to listen.
Yeah. What do you want to see happen in the space of mental health first aid?
I guess I want to see organisations really go, hey, this is important, and we want to support our people. We want to have a culture, like a supportive workplace culture, where we value our employees, we value mental health, we recognise this is an issue, and we want to have people within the organisation who are trained in mental health first aid.
Who in an organisation would be looking out for this, and how can they get in touch with your company?
Look, I guess every organisation is a little bit different in their structure and who would be the person that would kind of coordinate these sorts of programs. Sometimes it might be HR that might be involved in that. There might be an OHS rep or a role where they might be the person that's responsible. Sometimes it's the managers. So I'm happy to have a chat with anyone, of course, that's interested to know more. They connect with me on LinkedIn. They can send me an email or connect via the socials.
Tell us your email and your website, please.
So Hayley at remedyfirstaidtraining.com.au and the website is Remedy First Aid Training.
remedyfirstaidtraining.com.au. Fantastic. And is there a minimum number of participants or?
Yeah, so but, usually we say a minimum 10. The training always works better, particularly mental health first aid works better when there's more people. I think because you get a bit more engagement and activity. The activities are kind of designed for smaller groups. So the more people that are in that session really can, just gets a bit more thoughts and ideas and participation.
Yeah, so it's not a one-way lecture. You get them to kind of role play and
Yeah. So we're doing case
workshop ideas.
scenarios and discussions, and so it's quite interactive. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Hayley.
Thank
and
you.
I really am excited about the work that you're doing. I hope to be a participant of your courses.
That'd be
And
great.
I'd love to kind of engage you in the different community groups that I'm a part of to kind of, run your program for us, because I think it's so important. And wishing you well.
Oh, thanks, Manesh. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.